Thank you so much for attending the RPI virtual conference, and I'm very excited to be your co-host for our very next session called How Did We Get Employee Motivation So Horribly Wrong? And I'm very excited to have my friend Paul Herr here to participate in this conference, and Paul's going to shake things up just a little bit. So Paul, I want you to give us a little background regarding how you got involved in studying human motivation. Tell me a little bit about your origin story.
Well, Scott, my origin story goes way back to 1978, and there was a very specific place where this all started. It was Helen C. White Library on the University of Wisconsin campus in Madison and on beautiful Lake Mendota. And I was in the library, and the following thought struck me. And that is that, human beings and really all living things are just immaculately designed. We're elegantly designed. For example, the human eye obeys the laws of optics, and human engineers can't out-engineer what the eye can do. The human heart obeys the laws of fluid mechanics. Human engineers can't create an artificial heart that's anywhere close to what our natural heart does. Thermodynamics, the human body is more efficient than any human-made machine ever designed, and so on and so forth. So, we're really elegantly designed creatures. And then I thought, well, what about human motivation and human emotions? Where's the beauty and elegance in a system that causes people to jump off bridges, commit road rage, and go postal? And it seemed like there's a paradox here. Why would the emotional system be kind of jury-rigged if the rest of our systems are not? And I decided that there must be an elegant system there. I want to figure that out. I want to dive into what was nature thinking when it incorporated human emotions and feelings into human beings. I want to understand that system as an engineered system. So for the past 40 years, I have been trying to reverse engineer what the heck was nature thinking when it incorporated feelings and emotions into our system. And miraculously, I think I figured it out. I think we'll get into exactly what the motivational system looks like, but I believe I've cracked the code. And it turns out there's one other group, a team at Harvard, Neetan Noria, the dean of the Harvard Business School, and Paul Lawrence, an organizational behavior pioneer. They used a very similar thought process, very similar evidence, and they basically put the pieces of the puzzle together just the way I did. And I wrote a book called Primal Management, subtitle Unraveling the Secrets of Human Nature to Drive High Performance. They wrote a book called Driven, and a follow-up book called Driven to Lead. The books are very similar. A friend of Paul Lawrence, one of the Harvard team, had read both books, and he said, if I didn't know better, I'd think the same person had written both books. And Paul Lawrence actually read my book, and in his second book said, Paul Herr has done a marvelous job taking our model, our 4-drive model of human behavior, and turning it into a practical tool. And I was like, wait a second, time out. It's my model that just happens to converge with your model. And I didn't rip off their model. I didn't know it existed when I was writing the book.
Paul, go ahead, my friend.
No, that's good.
So Paul, it sounds like we're going to be talking analytics today, and taking an analytical approach to what normally I would consider probably a soft topic.
Well, there's a very good reason for that, Scott, and that is, I have an MBA from the University of Chicago, which has more Nobel Prize-winning economists than any place in the world, and it's a very left-brained place, and the CEOs who come out of the University of Chicago are very left-brained people. So I knew that I had to write a book that was rock solid, logical, and absolutely, true to the facts. And so I wrote it almost like a mathematical proof, putting, little breadcrumbs together logically, piece by piece by piece, because I had to lead CEOs from the belief that feelings and emotions are irrelevant to business or even harmful to business, to the exact opposite conclusion that feelings and emotions are the core of business, the core of the brand impression, the core of economic utility, the core of employee and customer satisfaction, and really the core of the economic capitalist system itself. So I had to take them from point A to point B with lots of little logical steps. And so I wrote my book to appeal to the left-brainers out there who tend to have important positions inside corporations.
So I think you're going to tell me today that we're going to be in for a wild ride with what you're going to share.
Well, you'd be correct in that, because what I'm basically saying is that the business community has a really flawed understanding of how human motivation works. Sorry. And we have to really dismantle that flawed understanding if we're going to make any progress. So, I hope to change your worldview, the audience's worldview, and get you on a more accurate understanding of how the human engine works, because lots of bad things happen if we don't understand what motivates people.
Now, are we going to talk today about an academic exercise, or do you plan to apply some of this theory you're going to talk about?
Well, Scott, I started out as more of a theorist, and this was sort of like a creative hobby for me at the start. It was just something I was very interested in. How do emotions work? And I started piecing the puzzle pieces together using this kind of evolutionary logic that we're built by nature to survive, and that all of our pieces should make survival sense, and it should be logical, and it should be understandable. So, but once I wrote my book, I switched gears. I switched from a theoretical aspect to a practical application focus. And that makes sense, because once you have a very clear understanding of how human motivation works, you can now design tools and techniques and processes that interface with that system efficiently. And so for the last 11 years, it's been pretty much all about applying the model to the real world to improve workplaces and improve performance. Now, let's take a look at my book for a second. You asked me about practical applications. Well, the book has 5 chapters that deal with the 5 drives, the 5 motivational drives that I'll be talking about today. And each of those chapters has a practical section at the end, a practical section for managers and for executives. So there's quite a bit of practical information in my book, and the book is really important if you want to try to improve motivation, because it has the framework. It has the 5 drive framework in it. It's not based on the Harvard book, but it's very similar. The only difference is you can read my book. You really can't read the Harvard book very well. It's very, very academic. So, so the book has practical information in it, and then I also, when my book came out, I turned the book into a software program. And now this does include some of the Harvard information. It's kind of taking my model and combining it with the Harvard model and then applying it as a real world software tool. And so the software tool has 3 components. It has the framework, the 5 drive framework, which again is very, very, very critical. It has a simple pulse survey called the horsepower survey to measure motivation, measure whether the 5 drives are being satisfied or starved in the workplace. And then it has a leadership development curriculum built into it and leadership resources built into it. And those are basically, teaching managers how to press the motivational buttons, how to activate these natural pleasures in the workplace, and how to improve performance by doing that. So in summary, there's a lot of practical information here. It's really I call it a human performance system, because it's got everything. It's got the framework, it's got the survey, it has the practical prescriptive tips for turning on the human engine.
So now we know a little bit about you, Paul. I knew a little bit before this, but now our attendees do. And let's really dive into what we're going to talk about today, because my entire career is built around motivation, and I'm going to be in this group. How did I included, get motivation so horribly wrong?
Well, Scott, the answer to that question is going to seem peculiar, but it is what it is. So 40 years of researching human motivation, I basically determined that it is a very stealthy, very camouflage system in our brains, and we're very marginally aware of it. It kind of influences what we do, but it's not the focus of our attention. So we need to, first of all, explain to the business community, how this happened. How did we end up with a system that's so difficult to understand that nobody gets it right? The current situation is that companies don't understand the motivational engine, schools don't understand the motivational engine, mental health professionals really don't understand the motivational engine. And we've ended up with an attitude towards the motivational engine, which is profoundly disrespectful and profoundly off base in terms of the science behind it. So we're really in a bad situation by screwing up with the motivational engine. And here are some of the things that happen if you don't get motivation right. Well, we have an epidemic of mental illness in our country. Half of us will suffer from a mental illness. I believe that most of that's because people's drives are being starved instead of fed. And if you starve one of these core survival drives, bad things happen. We have an epidemic of disengaged employees. Only 30% of employees care about their work. Well, why is that? Well, because companies don't understand the engine. They're not turning on the motivational drives properly, and their employees are starved and angry and unappreciated, and the outcome is really a stunning loss of productivity. Really, it's based on some calculations, it could be as high as $6 trillion a year in lost productivity because we don't understand how to press the motivational buttons properly. That's a third of our economy goes down the drain because we're screwing up on motivation. Even drug abuse is related to this, because if we activate the 5 drives, people get natural pleasures from their work. They get highs, natural highs from their work, and human beings need these highs. It's vitally important for mental health to experience these natural pleasures. And if people can't find the natural pleasures in their work, they take drugs, psychoactive drugs that press those buttons really hard. They like hammer on these motivational buttons to get really powerful highs that basically disrupt their lives. Also cause crime, because when people are non-functional but they need drugs, the only way they can get it is by stealing and crime. And finally, students. Their motivational buttons aren't being pressed either, and that's why we have an epidemic of disengaged employees and dropout problems. And there's lots of problems with the educational system by not understanding the engine. So my goal today is to kind of explode the hyper-rational mindset that we've been stuck in for like the last 100 years. I want to show how wrong-headed and arrogant it has been, and basically prove that feelings and emotions are the core of everything dealing with human beings. They are our survival mechanism. And if any one of the 5 drives was turned off, we'd be dead. We'd be extinct as a species. That's how important they are. So, anyway, our society is running off the rails. It's in trouble right now. And I'd like to get it back on the rails and get the help of your organization to do that.
So talk to me, a little bit about, and I've heard this in my career before, that explain why feelings or emotions they're often ridiculed in the office. I was told once in my career even, remove the emotion from your email. It seems like we've always sort of put it down and not really tapped into that. Can you talk about that?
I've got a wonderful slide to explain that to you. And so let's go to that one. And it shows an iceberg, and we're all familiar with icebergs. Most of the ice is below the waterline. Only about a quarter of the ice is above the waterline, which is exactly the right proportions for what I'm going to say. Now, in terms of the motivational engine, well, it's the same thing. 4 of the motivational drives are hidden from view. We're not aware of them generally. One of them is not hidden at all. That's the drive to defend. This is the drive that creates really angry, ballistic emotions like anger, fear, rage, jealousy, people going postal or having a nervous breakdown or crying. You know, those are all emanating from the drive to defend. When people feel threatened, we have a hair trigger called the amygdala that releases all kinds of powerful stress hormones and sends us off in a bad direction. So if that's the business world's understanding of emotions are the angry, unpleasant ones that we don't want in the workplace, well, that has corrupted the word emotion for the business community. It's ruined the brand impression. And all we have to do today is rehabilitate the brand impression by showing that the important emotions for business are below the waterline. They're very subtle, but they're very, very critical to business success because they motivate creativity and innovation. They motivate people becoming experts at their work and becoming competent. They motivate the achievement of daily goals. It motivates teamwork and collaboration. And those are the good things that all companies want. So companies have just basically, by just focusing on one of the drives, they've made a huge error. And that is that we have these wonderful productive drives, and we've essentially, what we've done is thrown out the baby with the bathwater. The bathwater is the negative emotions that come from the drive to defend. But what the business community didn't realize, well, the baby in here is good, and you want the baby. You don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let's save the baby today. How's that?
That sounds good, my friend. So identify for me, can you tell me when exactly the business community headed in the wrong direction and they began to disrespect that motivational engine?
Yeah, that happened over 100 years ago, actually. And this was a period, of the Industrial Revolution where we had immigrants flooding into the country. And we were now had assembly lines, and we started producing goods in mass quantities. And the people who design management are from this era, especially Frederick Taylor, the father of what's called scientific management. So these engineers developed a system of management with zero understanding of the motivational engine. They had no idea how human motivation worked. And so the only tool they had that they could use was basically fear, the drive to defend. Mm-hmm. So they developed a system of management which is coercive. It's based on rules, regulations, fear of being fired, a thick policy manual, and rigorous punishment if you don't comply to the formula and the script. And basically, the engineers crushed human motivation, crushed the human spirit, crushed innovation, and that's the system of management we're still stuck with because the engineers made a mess of it. Another reason the engineers made a mess of it is that engineers are left brain, and left brain people have a hard time thinking about feelings and emotions. They don't understand their own emotions, much less the emotions of the people around them. And I am an engineer, and I've met a lot of people like this, so it's a true thing. Analytical people tend to not understand. They're not so emotionally intelligent as you'd want. So we put the least qualified people in charge of designing modern management. So they didn't understand motivation, plus they had a natural propensity to not be aware of this vital system operating in the background. So I've got a bit of a bone to pick with Taylor and his cohorts who designed this really flawed system. We've really got to dismantle scientific management. It's a harmful thing to everybody, and it's got to go. So at the end of the talk, I'll talk a little bit about how we can reinvent and get rid of this mindset. One other slide which is important. This is the father of scientific management, Frederick Taylor, just talking about employees in a steel mill. He said one of the requirements for a worker to be a pig iron handler is that he be so stupid and so phlegmatic that he more nearly resembles in his mental makeup the ox. Does this sound like a person who should be designing a system of motivation for human beings? I think not. So it's just an indication that these engineers really messed it up, and we're still hobbled by this system that they created, and it's got to be repaired.
So I hear what you're saying, but that was 100 years ago or more, right? So tell me, have things not improved since then?
Well, there's a story I'm going to tell that kind of explains where we're at today. And basically, no, we're still stuck with a very left brain, analytical, anti-emotion, anti-feeling, really anti-motivation in general attitude. And that story started when I started a PhD in educational psychology at the University of Wisconsin-Madison campus. It was in 1985. I completed one semester, and then I met with my thesis advisor to pick a thesis topic. His name was Joel Levin. He was a statistics professor, a very good professor, actually. And I sat down in his office and I said, Joel, I want to study the natural pleasures of learning, because if we can turn on these natural pleasures, the students will be self-motivated to learn. I thought that sounded really reasonable. And he looked at me like I was an alien. He said, Paul, that would be career suicide. You don't understand that we're cognitive psychologists. We look at the brain as a computer-like mechanism. We have no way of factoring feelings and emotions into our framework. We don't think emotions are important, and many of us don't think they even exist. So I calmly replied to Joel and said, Joel, you and your cognitive psychologist colleagues are what's wrong with modern education, because you disrespect the engine that makes human beings go. And I am 100% disagreeing with what you just said. I'm out of here. I'm going to go to the University of Chicago and get my MBA instead.
Right.
And that was it. And so that's really, the scientific community was stuck also in the same place of disrespecting feelings and emotions. Now, fortunately, Joel was proven wrong. And not only proven wrong, he was proven wrong by one of his colleagues, Daniel Kahneman, a cognitive psychologist who won the Nobel Prize in behavioral economics. And Kahneman wrote a book called Thinking Fast and Slow that talks about how the thinking fast part is this emotional system that operates at the speed of light and makes most of our decisions. And the slow system is you and me, our rational mind that's having this conversation, which has minimal bandwidth, can barely walk and chew gum at the same time. It's just, basically the fast system does all the work and the slow system takes all the credit. So this is just a marvelous development in my view. And here's what Kahneman said after doing hundreds of experiments. He started out trying to prove the cognitive people like Joel Levin correct, but all of his experiments showed different results. And finally, he concluded that the cognitive psychologists were all wet. They were on the wrong track, and they were making fun of something that's really important. And here's a little quote from his book. He says, an important advance is that emotions now loom much larger in our understanding of intuitive judgments and choices than it did in the past. He further concluded, judgments and decisions are guided directly by feelings of liking and disliking with little deliberation and reasoning. And, he later in the book, he says, what we're finding out now, had you mentioned it 35 years ago, they would have thought you were nuts or an alien from another planet. And that's why Joel Levin reacted the way he did to me. I was the alien from the other planet saying, hey, Joel, it's totally different than what you think. So let's just talk a little bit more about the fast and the slow system, because it's very, very interesting.
Sure.
The fast system is automatic. We're not aware of it. It doesn't take effort to activate the fast system. It's always operating in the background, feeding us decisions and feeding us knowledge and directing our behavior. But then we take credit for it. We say, well, that was my idea. No, it wasn't your idea. It was this fast thinking system handed you the answer, basically. And then the rational mind takes credit for that. And that's part of the arrogance of the slow thinking system. It thinks it's the boss and it's making all the rules, when in fact it's making none of the rules. It's happening all in the background due to its fast thinking supercomputer partner. And so this slide kind of shows where we're at. It explains the situation, and it's a bizarre situation. This is why I mentioned at the very start, that this is kind of my answer to what's wrong with why we make a horribly misunderstand employee motivation, is that we are like puppets on a string. So this is the slow thinking system, you and me, and we think we are in charge of ourselves, but actually there are these invisible wires that are guiding us, and that's the emotional system that's pulling the strings, and we dance to those strings. So really, emotions rule, and the rational mind is the puppet. And the problem is we don't know that we're puppets, and we can't see the strings. That's why we've been stuck, because the system is so much in the background. It's directing our behavior, but we're not aware of it. It does it stealthily and secretly. So that's kind of the end of my talk. We could stop right there. Paul, why did we get it so horribly wrong? Well, it's just a difficult thing to understand. And it just confused scientists until very recently. Kahneman finally, kind of dug through it. I dug through it, and now we have a much better understanding of it.
So our inquiring minds want to know now. We're right there where I want to ask this question of you. What does that human engine really look like? And what exactly are those 4 hidden drives that you talk about being below the waterline? And what are the rewarding feelings or those natural highs that are associated with them?
Okay, Scott, you're gonna have to pay me $1 million to see this. This took 40 years of work, so you can just send that over to my bank account. But anyway, this is it. If I could pull your motivational engine out of your head and put it down here, this is what it would consist of. You have, part of it's very obvious. We have biologic drives for things like food and water. That's pretty obvious. And when you don't eat, it hurts. And that system works like a simple thermostat, as do all of the drives. All the drives are very much like hunger and thirst. And look at my hands for a second. So let's say this is the amount of nutrition that is optimal. And when we have that optimal nutrition, we feel satiated, we feel good. If we lack nutrition and it starts to hurt, we get hungry. And if we still ignore that signal, it really hurts. And eventually we're going to do as we're told by the motivational system. We're going to find food and bring ourselves back into equilibrium, or what scientists call homeostasis. If we eat too much, it hurts. Also, we feel bloated and that's painful. So we stop eating, and then gradually the amount of nutrition comes back to optimal and we feel good again. So that's it. That's how motivation works. It's a set of thermostats that regulate our survival. So let's just quickly go through the biologic thermostats, because they're self-evident. I mean, they're very obvious. Rest. We need to rest and recharge our brains. And if we don't, we feel fatigued. If we do rest the proper amount, we feel relaxed and sharp and energetic. And so that is clearly regulated with feelings. And if we don't get the right amount of sleep, if you can actually die if you are kept awake for like 5 days constantly, you'll die. And so it's vital, and there is a system based on pleasure and pain to make sure we do it. I just drove out to Colorado, last week, and I was in charge of driving the whole way, and at some point I got tired, and my brain was saying, "Hey, it's time to recharge, buddy. Better pull over." And eventually I did, and got some rest. And then we have to protect our bodies from physical harm. So there's all kinds of sensors built into our bodies to make sure we don't look into the sun, step on glass, put our hand in a flame, and they help us very rapidly create a sense of pain that causes us to, protect ourselves and not step in the glass or not look into the sun. Then we have to breathe to survive. So there's a system of pleasure and pain associated with that. Try holding your breath for 5 minutes. That's going to hurt a lot. And when you start to breathe again, as we hold our breath, we get further out of equilibrium and it hurts. And then as we breathe it, we jump back to equilibrium and we get this very kind of pleasurable sense when we get breathe again. And then we have to reproduce as a species. So there's, pleasures built into the system to make sure we do that. So this part of the diagram is easy because they're very obvious to us that this system works. And let's define a rule here because these are all following the same pattern. And that rule is, we'll call it an axiom, like mathematicians have axioms that are just self-evident. So what's self-evident here is that whatever is absolutely vital for human survival, there will be a system in the brain based on pleasure and pain to regulate it. There will be a thermostat. Now, Scott, I'm going to have you repeat that with me because it's so important. Whatever is vitally necessary for human survival.
Whatever is vitally necessary for human survival.
There will be a system in the brain.
There will be a system in the brain.
Based on pleasure and pain.
Based on pleasure and pain.
To make sure we do it.
To make sure we do it.
So, and it just makes sense. Nature didn't leave survival up to us. It ensured survival with these thermostats. Now let's talk about the other half of the circle. These are the social drives that complement the biologic drives to create a comprehensive biosocial survival system. This is the part that the business community was not aware of. Largely the scientific community was not aware of, but it's very logical, very sensible, and totally jives with our latest understanding of how the brain works. So the first drive is the drive to innovate. By the way, all of these have to be just as vital as the ones up here, or nature wouldn't have gone through the trouble of developing these control systems. But the first thermostat is the drive to innovate. And human beings, we are the technological creature. We are slow and weak and poorly armed, and our brilliance is our ability to invent technologies that increase our power and our scope. So this is absolutely vital for survival. There is a system in the brain. Actually, there's two. One is called curiosity, the pleasure of novelty, which gets us to explore the environment. That's related to dopamine, 5 receptors in the brain. And then there's the pleasure of an idea. When you get an idea, you get a little pop of pleasure. And that's triggered by natural opiates in the brain. And so, I'm actually an innovation junkie. I love getting ideas. I love exploring, and I'm very curious. So if you were going to characterize my motivational makeup, this is the button that I need in my work. If I don't have this, I'll be very unhappy camper. I'll be way out of homeostasis if I don't have this. I'll be out of whack, more or less. The next drive, it follows from the first one. Once we have acquired a survival technology as a group, as a tribe, we have to master those skills to become competent. We're not born knowing what to do. We're not instinctual creatures. We're learned creatures. We have to learn our culture's survival skills. And that's a beautiful system because as we master skills, the brain is tracking all this, and our self-esteem ratchets upward every time we add a new skill or acquire a new asset that the group expects. So if we can match what the group expects in terms of competency, we walk tall, feel proud, we're the big guy in campus, everyone's going to like us because we're kind of the attractive one or the skillful one. And as we lack these skills, our self-esteem ratchets down, and if it ratchets to the floor, we're depressed, which is nature's tough love message to say, being unskilled is not an option for a human being. If we're unskilled, we're dead. And so that's the second drive. It's very important. It's also, I call it sometimes the culture drive, because without this drive, there would be no culture. This gives teeth to culture. It gives an emotional bite to what the culture says is important. And we either pay attention to our culture or experience a very severe form of pain. The next one is the achievement drive. And that one is pretty simple. It's whenever we achieve a goal, when we use our skills to achieve a goal, we get a little reward, a little pop of pleasure, and it doesn't last long. It's like a little spike. It says, good job. You know, when Tiger Woods sinks a 50-foot putt, you know, he pumps his fist. That's dopamine. That's the achievement drive in operation. And that doesn't last long for a good reason. Nature wants us to achieve goals constantly, to constantly put our skills to use to solve daily problems and achieve daily goals. And this is the drive that your industry, the reward and recognition industry, is all about. You help companies make sure people are getting their achievement highs. We need achievement like we need oxygen. And if people don't get it, it's you know, basically they're bored and uninterested in their work. So, and another reason that this is important for you, for your industry, is that you help managers understand that sometimes employees can't tell if they've done a good job or a bad job, if they've achieved the goal or not. You need the manager who's more knowledgeable to say, hey, you really did at that meeting, you really gave a great presentation. You know, a lot of times new employees don't know if they've done well or bad, and it's really the job of the manager to give them that recognition that triggers this achievement drive and triggers that natural pleasure and makes them want to, you know, give you a high five, or, you know. So this is important, and your industry has done a wonderful job of understanding and helping companies turn this one on. Then there's obviously a drive to bond. We got to work as a team to survive. You know, a lone human being out on the Serengeti plain is lunch for a lion or a hyena or a leopard. But a group of human beings working as a collaborative unit using a common set of skills is a force to be reckoned with. And so this one is related to the neuropeptide oxytocin, which is called the relationship hormone, that creates a warm, friendly family feeling when you're with the people who are important to you, or you pet your dog, or go out with your friends after work. And so this one is really important in the workplace as well. It's what holds people together. And then there's finally the drive to defend. That's the one drive we don't want to activate. We want to activate these. We don't want to activate this one because it's the source of all those negative emotions we just talked about. So here are the four good ones. Here's the bad one. When the engineers developed scientific management, they only knew about this one. They didn't know that they can, you know, motivate and incentivize human beings with these powerful drives. So they just cobbled together a really misfiring system.
What I wanted to talk to you now about is, you know, when we chat a lot, you talk about the emotional paycheck. How does this relate to those four hidden drives that are below the waterline, the ones you just talked about?
Sure. Well, this is kind of a fun way to look at it, because it really brings into focus how important feelings and emotions are in business. So Scott, you're going to play two roles here. First, you're going to be employee A, and you're not a happy camper, and then we're going to turn you into employee B, where you'll be much happier. So employee A makes, say, $50,000 a year, and that's represented by this blue bar. But the brain doesn't think in terms of money, it thinks in terms of emotional reward units. There's a part of the brain called the striatum that creates rewarding feelings for all types of reward, including money. So it converts, you know, money into a feeling. And let's say you get 10 reward units for that $50,000. However, I'm your manager, and I'm a toxic manager. I've never said anything nice to you. I always criticize you. I ignore you whenever possible. If you have an idea, I send you out of my office. Get out of here. I don't want to hear your stupid idea. And I am just a pain to work with. You don't want to come to work because of me. So that toxic experience is like a deduction from your emotional paycheck. This is pain that reduced your paycheck from 10 to 5 because you had to put up with me. So your take-home pay is 5. 10 minus 5 is 5. And that's not a lot of emotional reward for a job. So you're probably not the best employee, I'm thinking. Now you get moved to another manager, and this manager is emotionally intelligent, a servant leader, and you also make 10 reward units. But because this manager, makes your life pleasurable, he compliments you, learns about your life and your family, is values you. When you do a good job, he congratulates you, maybe gives you some kind of reward for that. And this mentoring manager, this servant leadership manager, because he's pressing your motivational buttons, gives you this 5 reward unit bonus. So your take-home pay is 15 reward units versus Scott 1, which was 5 reward units. Where would you have worked more vigorously? Where would you have brought your A game to work? Here, where you're being abused and humiliated, or here when you're being appreciated and considered as a player?
Right. For me, I would be employee B. I like to think that I'm the manager of employee B, by the way.
Okay. Well, if you are, then you are a enlightened servant leader, and I tip my hat to you.
Thank you, Paul. Tell me, is it easy to activate the productive drives and the natural pleasures of work, which will thereby improve productivity and performance?
It's actually very easy. The only thing that has been stopping, companies from doing that is that it was hidden. It was, if you don't know about it, how do you activate it? Well, you can no longer say you don't know about it, because I just told you how the motivational engine works and about the 5 drives. So that's no longer an excuse. And it's actually very easy to activate. And that's because human beings naturally want to innovate. You don't have to force people to innovate. You just have to say, we want your ideas. We don't think we know everything, so when you get an idea, we'd love to hear about it. If it's a good idea, we'll give you some resources to pursue it, and hopefully it'll turn into a marketable product, or a product that makes us more efficient or more successful. So it's like that. You're just opening the door. We want you to become a skilled expert who walks tall and feels proud. And if you need training, we'll happily get you that training. We'll send you to the best conferences on the planet to talk to the best experts on the planet, and you can develop your skills to a very high level. So it's not hard at all. You just have to not screw it up, and you have to put an emphasis on it. You just have to do a couple of things right to turn on the engine, and you have to not disrespect the engine. You have to pay attention to it. So it's really more of an attention thing. Once you know it's there, it's really not hard at all to turn it on. Now, I did have a tip for your audience. Like, what's the one most important thing that we can do to activate the engine? And I thought about that a little bit. And let's say that you're an executive and you want to turn on the engine. Well, my advice is, think of yourself as the designer of a golf course. You're going to lay out the holes on the golf course so they're challenging but fair, and where an honest effort results in a win. So if you can kind of create a workplace that presses the motivational buttons and activates the 5 drives, then your company's going to be wildly successful. All you have to do is be the Arnold Palmer or whoever designing the golf course, and use these the tips in my book or some of the tips in my software, and just follow those and create a game that human beings like to play. So here's another slide that kind of shows this. in most companies, the managers take all the shots. Employees are the caddy, lugging around the boss's ideas, and most of the decisions are made by the boss, almost none by the employees. Most of the glory goes to the boss, very little to the employees. A lot of the money goes to the boss, less to the employees. And basically, that's not a way to motivate people, is to have them lugging your clubs around. What I recommend is companies basically promote employees from caddies to players. Let them make important decisions, and let them get ideas, and let them play the game of business. By forcing them to be observers, you hurt their ability to make decisions, and you stifle their development, and you make them feel more or less worthless. And that's just not the way to get the best out of people.
I agree.
So anyways.
I agree, my friend. And, I just piggybacking on that, to my next question is thinking about the industry that I'm in, and those of us who are joining today, is can the incentive and the reward recognition industry, can we contribute to what basically you're telling us is a conceptual reboot?
Well, Scott, your industry, you're my allies, basically. You've been working tirelessly to turn on the motivational engine, not just the achievement drive, but also some of the other drives. And what I can help you do is give you maybe a more accurate view of how that engine works. And then maybe you can also do for the other drives what you've already done for the drive to achieve. So it kind of opens up a new vistas of exploration for your industry to figure out how to activate the innovation drive, the competency drive, the cooperation drive, and how not to activate the drive to defend. So your industry can help in many ways to move the business from scientific management, which is that antiquated system the engineers came up with, to what I call natural management that works with human nature, not against it, that works with the 5 drives, not against them.
And if you're in marketing, which, even a lot of us who are in our industry have to do double duty quite often, actually, but what about a marketing professional? Can they contribute as well?
Absolutely. I love marketing people because they get it. They understand the importance of emotions. One of their bylines is the buying decision is 80% emotional, 20% rational. Well, I'd like to modify that statement somewhat, and that is all decisions, not just the buying decision, are 80% emotional, 20% rational. So it's not hard to convince management professionals about the engine and the drives. They've already intuitively understand that. So yes, so marketing people are definitely natural allies. They already understand at some level that feelings and emotions rule the world, and so they're on the team, let's just say.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you so much. You know what, my friend, you've explained, and I feel like I have learned today how we got employee motivation so horribly wrong. So can you summarize the road for me to a more productive and rewarding future?
All right. Well, I think there's 2 things we need to do to get to that future. First of all, we need to undo the harm that Frederick Taylor and the discipline of scientific management has done to us. It's very hard to change ingrained ideas, and these are very ingrained ideas. They're over 100 years old. They've been sort of poisoning management for all those years. And just to clarify what went wrong with the engineers is that they used the one lever to motivate people that you don't want to use. Do you really want to use fear and coercion to motivate your people to come to work and give their A game? I think not. Fear turns employees from allies into enemies. How far can a company go if most of the employees hate their company? if you're stuck using this to motivate people, you're in a world of hurt. We are in a world of hurt. That's why only 30% of employees care about their work. So let's scratch this off. Let's let go of this lever and turn on these levers, the drive to innovate, competency drive, achievement drive, and drive to bond. So these are the ones where we can make progress, and we don't need a thick rule book. People will do these things naturally. They'll bring their A games to work naturally. They'll take shots and enjoy the business experience like they'd enjoy a challenging game of golf at Pebble Beach. That's kind of the new world that I'm proposing, is a human-friendly world where we work with the system, not against it. Now, the second thing we need to do is to come up with a new form of management that does this, that doesn't press this button, but does press these buttons. And that's discussed in my book. It's discussed in the Harvard book. And in my software, I've got about 100 resources that videos and white papers, blog articles, and whatnot that can help get companies on the right track and sort of rebooting their management system. Kind of a makeover. It's not a tweak. We're not going to tweak what the scientific management folks came up with. We need to remake it. We need to do a reboot. And, so my book and my software are basically designed to do that reboot. And it's really not that hard to do. So we're just going to turn on the natural pleasures of work and just watch what happens. The results I have found are really almost unbelievable. An auto plant in Mexico with 500 employees, they had 65% employee turnover. And after 18 months of using my software and my book, they got it down to 15%, and productivity went up, I think, 80% in the process. So, if you get it right and you stop using fear, the upside is amazing, because motivation is so important and we've been screwing it up. You don't have to get an A in motivation, you just have to not get an F in it. Now, there's one final slide I'd like to show, which kind of summarizes everything as well. This is showing natural management, and it starts with companies taking care of their employees' needs by satisfying their 5 drives. You could also call it employee first management, because we're starting with the employee, not the customer. We're starting with the employee. We get the employee motivated, and once they're motivated to take care of the customer's needs. Because the customer's needs are being so marvelously taken care of, we get loyal customers and sustained profits. This is the way businesses should work. Start with employees, then the customers, and then profits, then the numbers. The numbers come because you're doing 1 and 2. If you just focus on the numbers, you're not going to get the numbers, because you have to provide value to people to get the numbers. And that's providing value to your employees, who provide value to the customer, hence they pay you. I mean, it's simple as that. I mean, there's no simpler way to look at it. I call it the circle of value. So that's pretty much it. There's your summary.
All right. So Paul, before we close out today, we're going to have a short video right at the end of this session, but you've had some exciting news this week. So do you want to share just a little teaser of that maybe?
Yeah, Scott. There's a company in your industry called Carlton One Engagement, and they have a software, an employee engagement software platform, and they've been interested in my book and my software for about 3 years since I met them, and they are actively incorporating the horsepower software into their new platform, so that kind of gets this technology out there in a pretty big way.
I think that's awesome. Congratulations, my friend. Congratulations. And I think we're very excited. Thank you so much for being here today, spending some time with us, new to our audience. And we'll look forward to hearing from more of you in the years to come. And we'll hopefully our attendees, you'll stick around for our very next session. We're very excited to have you. Thank you so much, Paul.
Here's a word you've probably never heard of before: hedodynamy. It means pleasure-driven, and refers to the universal human tendency to seek rewarding experiences and avoid painful ones. Unless you're extremely left-brained, it should be self-evident that we are all pleasure-driven creatures. If we can't find pleasure naturally in our work, we often seek it outside of work, in rewarding activities like sports and hobbies. If we can't find pleasure anywhere in our lives, we often seek it artificially through psychoactive drugs like heroin, cocaine, and methamphetamine. Drug use in turn fuels chronic scourges of crime and mental illness which cost us hundreds of billions of dollars annually to combat. This is not just a hypothetical problem affecting faraway lands, because half of us will experience a mental illness during our lifetimes. How about this simple solution? Let's create human-friendly workplaces that provide the natural highs that all human beings crave, so we don't need the artificial ones. For example, let's allow our employees the freedom to explore, experiment, and innovate, and experience creative highs at work. Encourage employees to achieve mastery in their work and experience the chest-puffing pride that comes with it. Make jobs challenging, but fair, so honest efforts result in uplifting wins. Encourage authentic, caring relationships and the warm feelings that come with them. If we build these simple pleasures into our work lives, we won't need the drugs that create the crime and mental illnesses that are killing us. Oh, I almost forgot. As a side effect, our companies will be twice as productive and profitable because we will feel twice as rewarded. Why don't we try this?